Welcome, everybody. This is Two Guys Tech Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Tessel, and I'm joined by the ever so handsome Branden Kasner. Branden, how you doing, buddy?
Not too bad for a Saturday. How about you?
I'm pretty good. We just got back from Penny Arcade Expo in Seattle last week.
Right. How was that?
It was back. PAX is back.
PAX is back.
Cons are back.
Yeah.
If you are a convention goer and you like conventions, it's fixed.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Because
it only took,
remote PAX seemed pretty...
remote PAX was terrible.
Like cringeworthy.
You got to do what you got to do, I suppose.
To keep the dream alive.
But it was fun. And if anyone is ever interested, check it out. Penny Arcade Expo, also known as PAX, is this basically a celebration of games, whether it's board games, video games. And I go every year. And I tried to get this guy to go, but
I couldn't do it this time. But we do have a new board game test out, I've been told. So
we do. Yeah, it came from PAX. Yeah, so.
We'll have to let you all know how it is.
Absolutely. So this month's topic, again, is a little nebulous, not nebulous, but ominous, like last month's topic. And that is, your company is spying on you. Yes, period. And we're going to tell you how. We're going to go through what methodologies that they're using and maybe how you can protect yourself to the best you can, right?
Yeah, and I want to roll back to how we kind of this topic came up. Rich at his company was implementing a tool called Crowdstrike, and I come in and he goes, I implemented Crowdstrike and it just Nmapped my entire network.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't know what Nmap is, Nmap will do a blank scan of your entire network and grab all the IPs on whatever subnet you give it. If you are in a government organization, don't run it. You'll have someone come to your cubicle very quickly.
Actually, most organizations that are big enough, if you have security tools like Nmap installed on your computer, someone's going to come visit you.
Yeah, if you EDR your network there and you're not part of the network team,
right.
You may get a ping on Teams a little quicker and a meeting invite.
Hey, I'd like to talk to you about why you're using these tools. And we'll talk about Crowdstrike, and we'll talk about micro-segmentation, and we're going to talk, of course, about actual spyware software that companies use and the differences, but also the similarities and why companies don't necessarily need spyware anymore to keep an eye on you. So with that, we'll get started. We want to start with first the obvious one, and that is actual corporate spyware software.
Hardcore original spyware.
Exactly. The real deal, the stuff that sadly enough, I've seen in every company I've ever worked for and lobbied my ass off to get rid of, successfully, mind you, because all you have to do is look your manager in the eye and say, do you really want to be that kind of company? And they're like, no, I don't. But
well, yeah. And at what point if you don't trust your employee to be working, should you have hired them?
That's
if you can't trust them at the end of the day,
right,
they're probably not in a very healthy relationship and a healthy environment to be working in.
Yeah, without going too far into like psychology and opinions, I will say, and you touched on a little bit, that my stance has always been, your manager's job as a manager is to talk to your employee that they manage, right?
Yeah.
And to have a open and direct relationship. And if you need to go around through subversive means like spying on them to find what they're doing, then you're actually a bad manager. Even if the employee's bad, I'm not saying the employee's not bad, but you're also a bad manager. You should go directly to your employee, talk to them, and be an adult, because you get paid more to be a manager. So be a manager. Anyway.
But
that's it.
Yeah, let's walk down the dark road.
Okay.
Let's assume that you're not that. You had some history on it, and then I'll bring this back up on what happened during the pandemic, because this thing was kind of humming in the background until about 2021, and then it just skyrocketed up.
Absolutely. So in general, the term spyware in this case is, like the spyware you're aware of. But the difference is that it's intentionally targeted by your company. Your organization would pay a company for this software. It has its own internal portal or cloud portal, whatever. But it's an intentional action where, someone says, I need to know more about employee X and what they're doing with their computer. Are they working, or are they browsing the internet? Are they buying stuff on Amazon or on Discord or whatever they're doing? They would install this software remotely. It is invisible to the user, and it's tracking what, Branden? It's tracking mouse movements. It's taking pictures of them with their cameras.
Yeah. I have everything from remote control of camera and microphone, so complete on and off, no lights, none of that to let you know it's there. Measuring keystrokes to make sure you're typing efficiently.
Type per minute.
It'll capture all your passwords, no matter what.
Everything.
Everything in your private messages, anything that comes up on the screen, all that, it can remote take screenshots. And they even had some newer ones that would like turn on your camera and do that old buzzword AI and would analyze if you're actually looking at your camera, if you're happy, sad, engaged, right?
That's just so gross,
right? And
so it's
like a lot of the cameras now, like your Mac has a LiDAR camera on it. So it doesn't even need to turn on the actual RGB one. It can just grab your LiDAR camera and 30,000 points of data away.
There you go. Yeah. So again, the intention of that software is to like specifically monitor the entire user experience of what your employer user is doing. And that just, if that doesn't give you like an icky feeling right now, then you're on the wrong podcast. That's all I'm saying. So that software, although it is obviously the worst of the worst, it's also the thing that's not really implemented that much, thankfully, because there's a whole lot of bad stuff that can be a side effect of using it, right? Especially if you find out, right?
And I want to make it also very clear, like you may work in certain industries where highly controlled access is wanted, say if you're in government or medical, but there are ways to make it that it's, it's monitoring the data being grabbed, not monitoring the person grabbing the data.
Yeah.
So it's important to make that distinction because lots of times the companies will justify that they need this spyware because they're like, oh, I work in medical, so I need to like make sure everyone's doing it. And it's like, no, you have better ways to do that without invading all of your employees' privacy, especially when people work from home.
Right. Yeah. There's a difference. There is like performance metric tracking software that tries to be the better version of spyware. And what it's doing is it's trying to help optimize an employee's use of assets. Again, this is, to me, it feels like a thinly veiled line to do the same thing. But that software somehow has moved up in the ranks of like shadiness to being less shady because you're actually trying to help the company know if there are roadblocks that they're creating for their employees that are slowing them down, not are the employees actually doing their jobs. And we're specifically speaking here of like the spyware that it's watching you move the mouse around the screen and all that kind of stuff. But so that's one aspect of it.
Well, and like once a company has like taken all this data from their employees, there's also a lot of thought of like, oh well, only I have a quote here that says, for the most part, it's impractical for your employer to read all your messages or look for gossip, and not just anyone can browse through data. But I've been in lots of corporate environments where that wasn't the case. Lara, you obviously want your HR to be data to be as secure as possible, but we've both worked in environments where security was there, but maybe it wasn't the most pertinent, especially when it came to inter-employee security and assuming who had access to what.
Yeah, that's for sure. You don't know who's actually getting access to that information.
But you talked about the softer option, and I kind of wanted to go back to that because during the pandemic, this spyware went from like hanging around like 20 to 30% to like 50% of usage by companies.
Wow.
Because everyone went home and every middle manager went, how do I know my employees are doing any work?
Their butts are not in the seats. How do I know they're actually making work?
And that prompted Microsoft to make the lighter version you were talking about called VIA.
Okay.
And some of you may have VIA in your inbox now. It's just a feature you turn on in Teams.
I get that.
Yeah, you do. Which means your manager gets the aggregate of that.
But oh, really? That's fascinating.
So
I have to talk to my manager because I mean, my day job is security engineering. That's what I do.
So you sit on Teams meetings all day.
I sit on Teams meetings all day, and I watch other people do things that I could do as well. But regardless of that, right? That's I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah. So I got a quick list of like what it does. It shows individual workers their own productivity rather than their bosses. That's like the big part. Managers will receive general productivity scores. I think that's from 0 to 100 on that scale, to see how they could improve their work-life balance and their performance. This has a little tongue-in-cheek to it. It's because it is. The software will identify who on your team you converse the most with and who you need to make more connections with, which I think is pretty funny. It'll identify the best time of day to book meetings based on your rising and falling energies. Right?
Oh my goodness.
And to schedule your flow of time.
Yeah.
And then it will keep tabs on your mental health, noting when scheduling too many back-to-back meetings, or recommending a 10-minute meditation to decompress before ending your day of work.
Thank you, Microsoft, for being my guru.
And finally, it'll alert you to how how your work will impact others. So if it sees you're trying to like send an email at 9 p.m., it'll be like, hey, do you want to delay that to the morning?
And then what I say to it every single time, no, send. I don't care. I'm not gonna play that game.
That's so bad.
If I'm up at this hour, I'm working on sending that email.
You are like, I think that's from the worker side. If I was a manager, I probably would just delay it, because I know there are certain people who, if they sent an email out at 9 p.m. and their phone went, they would look at it because they saw it was from their manager. And like, that's an awful tendency. But like, if you're a worker and like, say we worked, I'd look at Rich's and go swipe. And then I would look at it in the morning, because that's how I work.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference is, I think that it depends on your work environment and how you treat that stuff. Like for me, from my perspective, if I get a message from my boss, unless it is a crucial, critical, like you need to fix this because the world's going to end, I'm going to read it and mentally store it and then deal with it tomorrow.
If your boss did that, he has the pager system. You have one, I have one. Yeah, a lot of ITs out there have one. Yeah. If it's a critical issue, it comes through the pager system. Send it. Everything else is secondary.
Send it to the after hours. That's exactly right. Okay, so
let's talk about like a hardcore one. You have an example?
Okay, so I want to talk about, so we talked about spyware as an actual piece of software, enterprise spyware, and its control, and that kind of stuff. But these days, things have changed. A decade ago, that spyware was literally the only way you could find out effectively what your employees were doing, because everything was on premise, everything may have logged, but it only logged locally. There was no, it just was that was the way it was back then.
And you weren't grabbing endpoint logs. You weren't, you weren't going and grabbing all your laptop or your workspace. It was your Linux servers, your Windows servers. They all had a few SNMP traps, and maybe you were syslogging to a log server somewhere,
sending it to a SIM or something like that. But things have changed now. We have software that's used in the I'm going to say the enterprise, but it can be used in any level of business that provides deeper visibility into the user experience, what the users are doing, without the intention of actually being spyware. They have they have objectives and goals, and then there's this byproduct of getting to that objective and goal. So the first one we'll start with is Crowdstrike, and so there might be a lot of people watching or listening to this that don't know what Crowdstrike is. So let me give you the TLDR. Crowdstrike is commonly known as an EDR, which stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. Crowdstrike is a class of software protection, endpoint protection software, that is the future beyond antivirus and definition stuff. So without getting totally nerded out, because it is super cool stuff. Back in the day, you had an antivirus software. You may still have antivirus software. McAfee or Symantec. Or, you even have Windows Defender, which is free. And by the way, it's not bad. So if you're using Windows Defender.
If you used Windows Defender in like Windows 7 and you thought it was awful, you were right.
Yeah, it was bad.
But now in Windows 10 and Windows 11, it's pretty solid.
Yeah, it's one of the highest rated antivirus softwares. But the way antivirus software works traditionally is they have things called definitions. And definition is essentially a thumbprint, fingerprint, whatever term you want to use here, of trying to detect a signature, technically called signatures, of a piece of software, whether it's sitting on a file system or it's running. There is something that they can scan and see and match. It's pattern matching. And that's all it does. That's really all it ever did. So you installed a virus, downloaded a virus from gamewares.com because you're going to hack GTA 5 and it's going to be super glorious. And your antivirus would catch the signature of that piece of malware, whatever it is, and it'd be like, nope, and stop it. And then you could remediate by deleting it, whatever. So there's a TLDR of how antivirus work. EDR software, endpoint detection response software, like CrowdStrike and SentinelOne, that's another EDR software. They have definitions. I just want to be clear, they technically do, but they don't focus on definitions as a means of catching stuff. What they do is using a variety of machine learning and like crowdsourcing from other of their customers, and a little bit of AI, but I'm not quite sure how they're deploying that. They look for the behavior of the way a piece of software runs. So instead of being like, I started this application and the first chunk of that binary executable was this, and poof, that's a bad guy, I know that, so get rid of it. It is going to watch what the software does. Does it access protected parts of memory? Does it start trying to write to protected parts of the file system? Is it trying to insert itself or send out data over the network that it shouldn't be doing?
Yeah.
And it is incredibly good software. I don't want to minimize how incredible it is. Like, if you have the budget and you can afford to buy the enterprise endpoint detection and response software packages, you should do it, because it's the thing that protects most companies from getting ransomware and getting compromised, because they're that good.
Yeah, it's good to watch like exfil. So like one of the big,
right,
the way that it was always described to me was like you install Crowdstrike and you download this new update for this thing, but all of a sudden this new update is talking to some IPs, say in Iran or China or something, and it would start noticing that, and then it would cut it off, because it knows that software is not supposed to be doing that.
Yes. And so, okay, enough gushing over EDRs and Crowdstrike, because it's awesome stuff. The downside of this is these are cloud-based platforms. You have a client that is run on your computer. Nowadays, you actually get visibility, but in the earlier days, there wasn't even visibility. It would just, you didn't know.
It was running.
Yeah. And when you ran a piece of software that it didn't like, it just didn't run. So it created a lot of like user experience issues where people are like, I tried to run XYZ and it just didn't start. And the help desk was like, well, we'll talk to the security company or security team. Nowadays, it pops up and says, Crowdstrike blocked this because it's sus. But as a side effect of this, one of the things that Crowdstrike does, and when I was evaluating it for the company I work for, is that I have my work laptop at home. I work from home. I'm one of the people that did work from home, fight the power. Anyway, I was in the dashboard, and I was part of the group of like 4 people running the software. And in the dashboard, I started seeing computer names that were showing up in this dashboard that were very familiar. Like they were my computers on my network. And so one of the things, like Branden mentioned, it does is it starts to map out the subnet that your computer's on. It wants to know if there's anything scary, dangerous, suspicious. To what degree, I can't tell you. All you see in the dashboard is we detected a computer named this, and it's running Linux or it's running Windows based on its Nmap scan.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sent chills down my spine. And because all of a sudden, like, okay, so your company has every right to give you a computer and protect it. End of story, period.
Yeah.
Right? That's to protect them as an organization, to protect you. But it's just like, this is their piece of hardware. They own that. They have the right to do that. But it was the first time I had this realization that being there and being on a foreign network meant that it was then slurping up information that it had no right to have access to, visibility.
Yeah.
So, and we'll talk about how we can mitigate that or remediate that in a bit. So yeah, that was the long blown out like first experience.
Yeah.
They know what's on your network.
Well, like it brings up the question, like, what is the limit for companies to protect their assets? And obviously it can widely depend on who you work for.
Sure.
Like if you work, HIPAA, they're probably gonna scan everything.
Yeah.
But like, do they have a right to scan your own network to know? Because let's say you're not a home labber and you don't understand VLANs as well, but you're really
over your network.
But you're really into smart home stuff.
Sure.
And so you go buy some insert weird name of light bulb off, and that light bulb likes to talk back to China every now and then.
Sure. Check for updates.
Yeah, it's checking for updates from the Chinese servers.
Command and control.
So yeah, and so if that is part of a botnet or something, would then you'd want that mitigated as a company? I'd say yes on the security side.
Sure.
Assuming that would have a chance of infecting your PC. That's never happened yet. Just throw that out there.
Sure.
But just kind of, thinking of scenarios or stuff like that, or say you have boxes that are torrents that definitely only download Linux ISOs.
Mm-hmm.
Those would talk to all sorts of random fun stuff. And
Absolutely.
If you aren't in the security mindset that you need to VPN and all that, can you account for the average user? I mean, obviously those are very like low levels, right? It's way more likely that X employee is going to go click on Microsoft.ru.edu,
yes,
or whatever, and get their download. But like, where is the line that your company can feel their asset is safe enough and their data is safe enough, but you can also not feel like you're being spied on?
I think that that's a great question and a good point to make. I think as a senior security engineer by day, I would say, and also someone who personally is conflicted by, trying to protect, but also on two sides, protect company, protect self.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that, we're too quick to be like, I have nothing to hide. So here, go ahead and scan all my stuff. There's nothing bad here. By the way, that's not the point. You still have a right to privacy, even if you don't have anything to hide. But I think that from my perspective, there's a very clear defined line, and that is at the edge of that computer, in the sense of like, where it connects to the network, anything beyond that physical network connection is none of their business at all. It doesn't matter to me. The computer and its firewall, whether it's, it's running whatever, or but it's also got the EDR. That's the edge. And I can give you a precedent for it.
Yeah.
And that is, when you think about in America, we'll be clear, we're talking about the U.S. here because I know laws are different in different places. But in the United States, when you and I get our ISP, we get our internet, right? We have a thing on the side of our house that's called a demarcation point. And there's a law that was passed, one of the rare laws that seems to protect people in the United States, that says that at that point on the side of your house, that's when the services you're paying for and the lines that run into your home no longer belong to the company who you were buying the service from. So and this goes all the way back to like old POTS lines and like copper telephone lines, right? There was a box on the wall. You couldn't mess with that box. That box was not your property because from that point, it became part of their property, their network. But when those lines enter the home, from that point, that is your private property. And what you do with it is up to your discretion. It's yours.
Okay.
And I think that should extend to like this too, like an asset, whatever, not this is my personal computer, but an asset that's being protected should have a demarcation point.
At the computer?
Yeah, and it should be at the computer. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a good philosophy. I think it's a little harder when we have so many things that run east-west traffic now at home. So like, and then we have so many other interest points that are also like wireless. It's no longer that you have to plug in your mouse anymore.
Sure.
You got a Bluetooth mouse. But there's also lots of other Bluetooth devices that are doing random stuff around your network. And then you have stuff that has certain protocols that like to ping off of things. So like one of the new things in Windows Power Tools is, what is it called? Every mouse, over mouse. It's basically
where you can between.
Yeah, you connect these two versions via a key, and now you can run your mouse over both things, and it's a really cool piece of software. But that is using your Wi-Fi connection to connect over two things to use a mouse. Now those two things are linked somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's the convenience versus security conundrum, and I like the thought that as soon as, it's just the asset that is their device and the information on it, it's not anything else. Mm-hmm. Is that a feature you can turn off in CrowdStrike too? Could you turn off
so
the network mapping stuff? Because I'd love if I popped up at a Starbucks and it just...
So here's the thing that was fascinating.
It means we don't AP isolate, right?
When we were going through the evaluation process and we had the pre-sales engineer and we're going through this and he's explaining how all this works and what it was. And I saw this and I had this like, the oh shit moment where I'm like, hey, that's not cool. And I want that turned off for a variety of reasons. One, the primary reason is my privacy, my stuff, get out. Two was from someone who would have to maintain and support that platform. You've got your computers, but if you see everybody's ancillary connected devices, it just becomes this big mess. Like you're trying to search for something and it just becomes a mess. So I asked the engineer, the pre-sales engineer, can we turn that off? Or better yet, how do we turn that off? Because I want it off. And his response was, no, it doesn't work like that. It's on always. There's no option.
Well, I think that's funny because so for people, applying on your employees in the U.S. is vastly easier than lots of other countries.
Oh, yeah.
Do they sell to people in Europe? Because EU would...
That's a good point. Actually, they're all over
they would
CrowdStrike,
love to know about that.
That's a global again, CrowdStrike is really great stuff.
Yeah.
And so absolutely it's being sold in Europe. But you're right. That's something I didn't even think about and something that I'm going to have to look at. Because
as former workers for a German company, I know a workers' council that would be all up about that.
Exactly. The workers' council will have a word with you. Come into the office. Yes, I that's a good point and something that I'll need to look into. So, but from a U.S. perspective, the dude said no.
Yeah, interesting.
And so you're probably right that the EU's privacy laws probably impact that cloud platform in country than it does in the United States.
Yeah.
So, or maybe
they may not collect, right? Yeah.
Or they might collect and just not make it available because the platform does a thing, and if you don't share with people, then does it exist?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, in with that, that first part of this, because I want to move on to another example I've got here for you that Branden and I are going to talk about. With an EDR that's scanning regularly your network and seeing your other devices, that's not nearly as pervasive as spyware software that's specifically seeing everything, right? But it's a component. It's one component of the ability to see what's around you And that's, in my opinion, is a violation of your privacy, right? So it's watching over you and what you're doing. Now let's talk about another piece of software, another security concept that is being deployed regularly, and that's called micro-segmentation. So TLDR on micro-segmentation, if you understand what the term segmentation means in network terms, it's basically like you're making little buckets of IP addresses or networks, right? And they might connect to each other through routing protocols. The internet is segmented, right? You have your ISP, who gives you an IP address. You go to their router. There's another stream of IP addresses, but those are segmentations. Micro-segmentation takes all of that and really just amps it up to the highest degree. Whereas instead of being in a network where the analogy I love to use, I'm going to use an analogy here. It's like most home networks, most company networks without a micro-segmentation software system or design approach are like coconuts. You've got a hard outer shell, right? And that is your firewall, your corporate firewall. People can't get in, they bounce right off it. But for the clients that are inside the coconut, it's open and free. There's no limitations. You want to talk to Branden, you want to talk to me, it doesn't matter. There's nothing blocking you. You just do it.
You want to talk to China? China wants to talk to you.
Yeah, China can't talk to you, but you can talk to China, that sort of stuff. Micro-segmentation is more like a pomegranate, where you've got a hard, it's not really hard, but you have an outer shell.
Yeah.
And then you have all of these seeds inside. Those are your computers, your assets, your servers, your clients, whatever. And there's little bubbles of protection around. Those are the segmentations. And so you can't just easily pass through and talk to Branden or me. There has to be a port or protocol that's opened up so that you can have that conversation, and it's kind of blessed. Micro-segmentation is part of a zero trust methodology for protecting network where nobody trusts anybody and the conversations that are happening are explicit. Micro-segmentation is really, really good for protecting a company, because if I download a piece of ransomware because I'm an idiot and I execute that or somehow execute something from a bad actor, if it tries to move laterally to Branden, it can't, because I don't talk to Branden. My computer doesn't talk to Branden's computer. My computer talks to servers and it talks to things on very specific ports and protocols. And so it just stops it right there. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So micro-segmentation from a security perspective and a company protection perspective, great stuff. And, there are companies like Zero Networks and there's companies like VMware,
NSX,
DFW, which is only for virtualization. But these pieces of software are protecting you by segmenting and monitoring and opening and closing ports on firewalls and doing that kind of stuff in real time or near real time, so that people can talk when they need to talk and not talk when they're not supposed to be talking. As a side effect of that, any computer or server that is in micro-segmentation, every network communication and conversation that they're happening, whether it's to another computer or into that computer or to the internet, is being logged and displayed so that you can see it. If you wanted to find out what type of behavior a person had, like say you wanted to know what their political affiliation was or what sort of stuff they go onto the net, search on the internet, you'd find it, because it'll tell you, it'll show you the sites. It'll show you all those conversations, how long they talked to them, how long these conversations happened, and the quantity of data that was transferred.
Oh yeah, and I want to make it clear though that micro-segmentation is part of that, but also a lot of that's tracked at the application level. If you look at your Teams, your Slacks, your Zooms, whatever,
sure, there's
a log of who was on every call, how long the call was, and possibly what you said.
Right.
It depends on if that's turned on. And Rich's thing is really important, is to micro-segmentation helps us in lots of security ways, because you can't talk to what you're not supposed to talk to. And it also helps us when we do things like client, AP isolation, where you isolate all the clients on AP and all your stuff goes to VPN, but that sends everything to a router, and your router knows all.
Sure.
And so it's going to tell you exactly what's happening on your firewall and whatnot, and where things are going and if they shouldn't be going.
Correct. Fundamentally, there is no such thing as privacy when you're using a corporate asset or using the internet. As far as where your traffic is moving, the difference I want to make here with these tools that we're talking about is that it creates a really pretty dashboard that anybody in your organization who has access can go and show you. And so, whereas we'll go back to the top, the spyware software gives you a complete picture in a very scary big brother sort of, I'm watching everything you do, but is very targeted. The other systems are transparent to you, and overall their objectives aren't to watch you. However, their side effects are that they absolutely are watching everything you're doing, and anyone can go and look at that information.
Yeah, and I think also to add on to his micro-segmentation thing, if you connect a personal device to work Wi-Fi, everything...
Please don't do that anyway.
Everything will... I mean, let's sum it up. The one thing you should take away from this is go get yourself a personal laptop,
right,
and do personal stuff on it, and go get yourself a work laptop and only do work things on it. And the same thing goes for personal devices. Like if you hook up your phone to corporate Wi-Fi, every packet you send is in the clear, and odds are they're doing deep packet inspection, so they know exactly what that payload is.
Absolutely, yeah. I do that every. I mean, we use Meraki, and we
Meraki give you a nice, pretty dashboard for all that stuff.
The dashboards, the single panes of glass, baby. That's where it's at.
50% of my clients just going to Facebook.
Like if you knew how much time people spent on just like Netflix, it'd blow your mind in an office on campus. Okay. That I think is a great segue into the final part of this, and let's talk about how people can protect themselves, at least to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, so let's start what personally you can do, and then we'll go into some bigger stuff on like what you can do at home, and then we'll talk about like policy changes. So first things first. Only do work stuff on your work computer.
100%.
Stop doing taxes. Stop going to Discord. Stop all of the other stuff you're doing, and just be on Teams and work stuff. It's critical.
If you were given a company asset, and this is not company talk, Rich. This is like privacy, Rich, saying if you have a laptop and you take it home, even if you work in the office, but you have the luxury of working remotely with your laptop on occasion or permanently, do not use your work asset for anything personal. I know that you're not doing anything wrong. I know that you're not doing suspicious stuff, and I know that you are just working and you're a good worker. It doesn't matter. They can see everything. Don't get on your bank account.
Don't go to Spotify. Don't log into anything.
Do not. Yeah.
Like it's hard because there's like, you want those little like go back and forth stuff and just separate it out.
Right.
And the same thing goes for personal phones. I'm personally bad at this because I like to have one device to control everything, but you can't
to rule it all.
If you're truly concerned about it, you need to have a separate device for both your phone and your computer.
Yeah, if your company offers you a work phone too and pays for that service, they own that phone. And fundamentally, point period. Like I've been in a lot of company meetings where we had to take a person's personal phone, which was provided by the company, and pull the information off of it because we needed to see if that employee had done something wrong, or somebody who was doing something wrong adjacent to that employee had somehow crossed the streams, if you will.
Yeah.
And you just don't own that phone.
Yes.
And at a minimum, and this is the crazy thing, is that at a minimum, let's say that your company gives you a phone and they're a cool company, like your CEO, he's awesome, and he's not going to do anything bad. He's not going to do anything against you as an employee. But if they want to see how much time you spent on TikTok, or they want to see what ancillary apps you have on your computer or your phone, they can do it. They have every right to. They can pull that phone back in if they're running the software that's managing like an MDM to manage that phone. They already have that data. Yeah. They know how much you're spending on there. They know how much you're using that phone for work. And again, most companies are not douchebags or jerks, but we're talking about a privacy approach where you are protecting yourself and you're also helping protect the company. Don't get me wrong. This is a mutually beneficial thing, but you are staying off personal stuff, off work assets.
Yeah. And then another thing is just your mindset. When you're at work, you're being watched, whether you think so or not, whether you're at home, in the office, on a work trip, whatever, doesn't matter. You're probably being watched if you're using a company asset to some degree.
Yeah, to some degree. Exactly. 100%. No matter what, your computer and the software that you run on it has a lot of long tails. Like you mentioned Microsoft and Teams. Absolutely. Microsoft's keeping track of the conversations, the durations of the calls, the quality of those calls, who you talk to. That's out of the box. That's just built in. That's what you get when you use Microsoft Teams. You didn't have to ask for that additional visibility. Okay, that's a great point. Don't use your work stuff for personal stuff, period, the end. Don't do it. What about when you're working from home? What could you do to protect your network and your privacy of the things that are running your network from a work asset that looks?
So there's kind of like two. One is a very half-ass approach, which is use a VPN.
Okay.
I put like an asterisk on that because like it won't always apply. It won't always do everything. Not all VPNs are encapsulating all your traffic. But the bigger thing, the better thing to do is make yourself a work network. If you understand how VLANs work and doing like layer 2 routing, you can set up a little work network and just have one port plug into it, and that's the only thing, and make sure it just talks to the internet. Doesn't talk to any local subnets, doesn't talk to anything else. It just goes out there.
You can imagine, so you're entirely Ubiquity now at home too?
PFSense routing, because
PFSense routing.
Like lol L3 routing on Ubiquity.
But so here at my place, I have PFSense as well. Branden and I are big PFSense fans. But the rest of my network is Wi-Fi is Unify. The network switching is Unify.
Yeah.
And my configuration, like Branden's, we use a concept called the network on a stick, where the firewall is also the layer 3 router. So the benefit of that is that the firewall can have firewall rules to block cross traffic between those different VLANs and subnets. And you can guarantee the instant I saw my stuff show up on that CrowdStrike dashboard, I had instantly instantly created a WorkNet VLAN, and it can only go to PFSense. It can only go out to the internet. And on top of that, just out of spite, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but I'm going to say it, like on my regular networks, I use PF Blocker NG. I also use, what's that? The little ad block software, Pi-hole for certain things for blocking sites for the kids and stuff. And so all of my regular assets, including my IoT stuff, is all essentially being protected by these multi-layers of DNS filtering and IP address geolocation filtering to protect stuff, right? WorkNet, I'm like, nope, you don't get none of that. This is not my device, and it's not my responsibility as a homeowner to provide you a safe network. So
I will provide you the free security I have.
Right, yeah, I mean, which would literally be a click. I get it, it's spiteful, but I was upset. And
I mean, to be fair though, you, like, if you were, say, to work in marketing, you would be talking to a lot of the domains that your DNSLB, your Pi-holes think are dangerous. And
that's 100%. I know that right now from a personal perspective, anytime I want to look at like AdSense stuff from Google, I have to get on my phone's hotspot because I block that, because they block AdSense at the home. Anyway, so I still have a firewall in front of this, and it's still a private IP address, and it's a natting firewall that's protecting it, but that's the end of it. Like, it gets assigned a private IP address inside that subnet, and it gets Google's DNS as a public DNS resolution, and that's it. It's then Rich's job as the security engineer to make sure that asset is protected, not Rich's, home lab,
not the whole
self-hoster guy doing it. So, so do that 100%. If you don't have the ability to do that, then you just need to accept that your company is seeing more of your personal network and more of your personal stuff than you think they are, right?
Yeah, and like, again, you don't have to have the full Ubiquity setup and stuff like this. You can go get yourself for a couple $100, get a PFSense router and run it right off the router.
That's true. That's very true.
So like, don't think you need to have the wild setup we have. We're what you might call eccentric to a degree. Not the most eccentric, but a little bit. Yeah. In terms of like home lab stuff, but it's seriously worth it. That'll also just make sure, there are no issues on your end when you're troubleshooting stuff with your local IT team. If they have, issues with your VPN,
that's a good point.
Issues with stuff like that. I had just a fun story here. I was trying to connect to VPN one day at my last company, and I was like, why is this getting blocked? And somehow one of our VPN servers had gotten on a PR1 bad IP geo IP list, and it was just kicking it out every single time. And I was like, oh my God. And so I knew what the problem was and turned it off and fixed it. But I was like, it can happen to anyone, and you don't want to like spend time troubleshooting your home lab while troubleshooting your work stuff.
Right.
It just make your work stuff, and your home lab stuff, your home lab stuff.
I just had another thought pop to mind, and that is, if you have one of those, like, you get this, actually, I would almost say that most like Wi-Fi router all-in-one boxes from like TP-Link or Netgear or whatever, they have like guest Wi-Fi networks.
Yeah, that's another good thought.
Turn that guest Wi-Fi network on and put your work laptop on it, and only that. Don't put it, you don't need to use it for anything else. Put all your regular stuff. Like, I don't want you to think you need to have this bespoke, segmented, like layer 3 routed network and that kind of stuff. You don't need that stuff unless, like Branden said, you're like one of us. But realistically speaking, like, use the guest network.
I think on Ubiquity, the guest network has API isolation on by default. which is a nice thing to turn on because then your client will only talk to the AP and the AP will only talk to the router.
Yeah, and I think that's,
keep in mind.
I think that's even how those other cheaper ones do it. That you are effectively isolated. It just has a separate NATing interface and just dumps them out. So that way your guests who connect to it don't get to the rest of your network. So that's a really, actually, I'm kind of glad I thought about that. So yeah, I guess, we're that's the long and short of it. I don't mean to make it sound like most companies and people who run those companies, especially in security, have good intentions. We have objectives, and those objectives are to protect the company and protect their assets and the technology, to prevent exfiltration of data and protect the assets and don't get ransomware so that it doesn't
mostly ransomware these days is like, the security podcast we listen to has basically stopped doing most ransomware,
right,
because it's so prolific in our day-to-days.
So, the long story short is, for people who might not be aware of it and who are, maybe tangentially interested into it, just know that stuff is out there. It exists. It's happening. It's happening right now. If you're watching this on your work laptop on YouTube, you might want to, heed all warnings, right? Come on now. But
and some bigger things you could do if this is really an issue to you and you want to bring it forward, check with your company. Mm-hmm. They should have a policy for it.
That's a good point.
They should write it down. They don't have to. More on that in a bit. If privacy, again, is one of your big things, obviously talk to your local reps. Here in the U.S., we have, the House and the Senate. Yeah, right. I can't remember our own government system most of the time, but that's not the point. Talk to them, get in touch with them on privacy issues and say that employee spying is not okay. And if you're one of those few people who has a union rep, talk to them.
Right.
They can make sure that your company's not doing this as well.
Yeah.
But for the rest of us who don't have those luxuries, just understand you're being watched. Mm-hmm. Make sure you have a separate device.
Yeah, get a separate device. Yeah. Yeah, Branden, I don't want to spend too much time, but you hit a great point. That is, your company has policies, unless it's small. They have policies because policies are how they protect themselves. An employee decides to sue and they're like, well, look at the employee policy. They signed it. In that policy, you're going to find that they explicitly list all the things that they can do or may do, as they might say. So you're not just two random dudes on the internet telling you about this. It's there already. You just need to be aware of it. You probably already signed it in that big pile of paper, the work that you
because everyone definitely read that full 50-page
on your first day orientation when they're like, you need to sign this and this and this, and thank you for joining the company. You're gonna have such a great time. You're like, what did I just sign there? Oh, you don't have time for that. You got to get over and learn your job. So, I think that's it in a nutshell. I think that that was exactly what we wanted to talk about. This is the point in the video or podcast where Branden says we should, I'm actually wearing swag today.
Yeah. I forgot mine. I couldn't find it, so that's all me.
I guess I need to buy Branden some more 2Guys Tech stuff. And I promise we are working on more designs slowly.
Yeah.
Just all the other things. And I guess this will do it for the month, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah, if you guys want to tell us how wrong we are, you can feel free to do it in the comments or actually engage with us on Discord. We're
get in our Discord.
Really active on that one. And if there's nothing else you take away from this, go get yourself a Chromebook if you get nothing else.
It's $250. I mean, I know that's flippant to say, but it's super cheap. Go buy a used refurb one for $120 and just browse the internet on that.
The amount of refurb Latitudes on eBay.
Oh yeah, get on eBay.
Go get yourself a Dell Latitude or whatever the HP equivalent is these days. It's the Latitude 9510.
There you go.
So it probably goes for $400 now, tops.
And it's a great laptop.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, and we will catch you next month.
Yeah. See you guys.